My name is Sofia Rivera, and the year I turned 34, I was invisible to everyone but the people who could afford to ignore me. I want you to understand something before we start. This isn't a story about a girl who never gave up. It's a story about a girl who gave up everything and then had to learn the difference between surrender and strategy. Those are not the same thing, and the world wants you to believe they are. I'm standing in front of you to tell you they're not. Let me take you back to a Tuesday in November, 8 years before everything changed. I was working at Billionaire's, one of those Manhattan restaurants where the wine costs more than my monthly rent, and the staff pretends not to see the contradiction. I'd been there for 3 years, perfecting the art of being unseen. It's not actually hard once you understand the principle. Make yourself useful. Keep your voice low. Exist in the spaces between the important people's conversations. I had a reason for this invisibility. I had 7 of them, actually, but the most important one was written in legal documents filed by a man named Samuel Torres. Samuel and I had built something together. Not just a company, Nexus Financial, but a life. A partnership that lasted 3 years of work and 2 years of engagement. I have a degree in linguistics from Northwestern University, a master's in computational finance, and a CPA certification. I can speak 5 languages. I designed 17 algorithmic trading protocols that Samuel took credit for, and I stayed silent because I loved him, because I believed love meant being small enough to fit into someone else's ambitions. I was wrong about what love means. When Samuel decided to keep it all, the company, the clients, the innovations, the future, he did it with precision. He didn't just take my work. He took my credibility. He filed charges against me for embezzlement, froze my accounts, rewrote our partnership agreements, so that I appeared on paper to be nothing more than an employee he'd generously given an office to. Then, at the last moment when the case was about to go to trial, he dropped the charges and told everyone he was doing it out of mercy. Do you know what people hear when someone drops fraud charges? They hear guilt. They hear that you were guilty and you got lucky. So there I was, 8 years later, carrying wine bottles through a dining room full of people richer than I'd ever been, wearing a uniform and a smile, and completely erased from the one thing I'd actually built. The funny thing about being invisible is that you notice everything. You notice how the rich couple at table 7 argues without looking at each other. You notice the businessman at table 12 checking his phone while his date talks about her promotion. You notice the older woman at table 3 signing to the waiter because she's deaf, and most people just smile and nod and move on. My job that night was to refill wine glasses and remember that my tips depended on being forgettable. That's when he noticed me. His name was James Mitchell. He was sitting at table 12 with the older woman, his mother, I'd find out. And he was the kind of man who doesn't usually notice Serta's staff at all. But something I did made him look up. Something small and ordinary that I've gone over 1,000 times in my head, trying to understand the exact moment your life bends towards something different. The woman at his table was signing. And without thinking, without remembering that I was supposed to be invisible, I answered her in sign language. And everything changed. But here's what I need you to understand before we go further. Change isn't always good when it arrives. Sometimes it's just pain wearing a different costume. Sometimes the person who comes to save you is actually coming to complicate your life in ways you can't yet imagine. James Mitchell asked me where I learned sign language. I told him I studied linguistics in college, and I watched his face shift from polite interest to something else. Something that looked like recognition, but of what? I didn't know. That night he left me a $200 tip on a dinner that cost $600. His mother had asked me questions about Paris, about travel, about whether I'd been there, and I'd answered without thinking, pulling from memories I wasn't supposed to have anymore, from a life that was supposed to be over. When I got home to my studio apartment in Queens, there was a text message from an unknown number. James Mitchell had gotten my information from the restaurant's HR department. He'd done it without asking permission, the way rich people do, the way people with power do, the way Samuel had done. I should have been frightened. I was terrified, but underneath the terror was something else, a recognition that I was no longer completely invisible. Someone had seen me. The question was whether being seen was about to become dangerous. I didn't respond to his message. I turned off my phone and pulled out my laptop, an old relic from my previous life that I kept hidden like other people keep photographs of lost children. I typed a search I hadn't done in 2 years. Samuel Torres, Nexus Financial. The results made my stomach drop. Samuel's company had grown exponentially, built on the foundation of my work, of course, though you'd never know it from the company history. But the recent news was what made my blood cold. Nexus Financial announces merger with Mitchell Industries. James Mitchell, Samuel Torres, partners. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my laptop screen, and I understood something with a clarity that felt like falling. James Mitchell wasn't interested in me because he'd noticed something special. He was interested in me because he was already connected to Samuel. This was a trap, a careful, deliberate trap designed by people who understood that I was the loose thread in a very expensive tapestry of lies. I didn't sleep that night, and the next morning, when James Mitchell texted again asking me to have lunch with him at Columbia University, at my alma mater, where he'd deliberately chosen to meet me, I made a decision that would either save my life or destroy it completely. I said yes, because I'd spent 8 years running, 8 years being invisible, 8 years letting Samuel Torres own the narrative of who I was and what I'd done. And I was tired. I was so incredibly tired of being afraid. What I didn't know then, what none of us know when we're standing at the edge of something, is that justice doesn't arrive quietly. It arrives with blood on its hands and complicated intentions, and it asks you to trust people who haven't yet proved themselves trustworthy. But I was ready to find out if anyone ever could. Welcome to dramatic revenge, where broken people learn to rebuild themselves, and the quiet ones discover that sometimes the loudest thing you can do is refuse to disappear. If betrayal, calculated redemption, and the price of reclaiming your own story are your thing, you're in the right place. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. And be sure to subscribe, because Sofia Rivera's testimony is just beginning. This is a story about a woman who was erased, a billionaire who noticed, and what happens when you decide that the only person who gets to own your narrative is you. Columbia University's campus looked exactly like it had 8 years ago, which meant it looked like a monument to a life I'd abandoned. The steps of Low Library, the same steps where Samuel had kissed me for the first time, where he'd told me I was brilliant, where he'd promised me forever, were packed with students who had no idea that the ground beneath their feet could shift without warning. James Mitchell was already there when I arrived, sitting on the stone with 2 expensive coffees and an expression I couldn't quite read. He looked different in daylight, less threatening somehow, which made him more threatening. Threats you can see coming are manageable. It's the ones wrapped in courtesy that destroy you. "You came," he said, standing to hand me a coffee from a place that cost more than my daily wage. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," I told him, accepting the cup but not sitting down. The admission surprised us both. I'd planned to be careful, measured, strategic. Instead, I was being honest. "Why did you?" I looked at him for a long moment. James Mitchell was tall, with dark hair that probably required a stylist, and eyes that caught the November light like they were worth something. His suit was Italian, definitely expensive. Everything about him whispered that he'd never wanted for anything in his life. "Because I'm tired of running from my past," I said, "and I think you know something about it." He studied my face the way someone studies a puzzle they're determined to solve. Then he gestured to the stone beside him. "Sit, please." I sat, maintaining distance between us like it was a barrier. "Tell me about Samuel Torres," he said quietly. The question came in my head. I could have lied. He stole everything from me. My work, my reputation, my credibility. And when I couldn't prove it, everyone believed him instead of me. James didn't respond immediately. He just watched me, his gray eyes moving across my face like he was trying to memorize something. "How long have you known?" I asked. "How long have you been planning this?" "Planning what?" "The trap, the connection to Samuel, the merger that was supposed to draw me out." James set his coffee down. "Sofia, I don't know what Samuel told you, but I have no partnership with him. I don't know anything about traps. What I know is that 3 days ago, you were kind to my mother when you had no reason to be. You didn't even know who I was. Most people don't do that anymore." "Your mother said you work too much and don't meet interesting people," I said, testing him. "She said what?" He laughed, genuine surprise in the sound. "That's probably exactly what she said. What else did she tell you?" "That you should meet more interesting people," I said. "And that you should eat more vegetables." He laughed again, and I felt something shift in my chest. Fear, maybe. Or the absence of it. She definitely didn't say that last part. You're testing me. Yes, I admitted. Because the last person I trusted completely destroyed my life. So I'm testing you. James's expression became serious. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Fair. Test me. But Sophia, I need you to tell me the truth. Is Samuel Torres connected to my company? I pulled out my phone and showed him the search results. Nexus Financial announces merger with Mitchell Industries. James Mitchell, Samuel Torres, partners. I watched his face cycle through shock, confusion, and something that might have been anger. When? He demanded. 2 months ago, the merger was supposed to close next quarter. I'm canceling it, he said immediately. You can't. Why not? Because he's expecting you to use me against him, I said. They anticipate threats. They eliminate them before they have a chance to become problems. If you cancel without explanation, he'll know something's wrong. He'll come looking for leverage, and I'm the obvious loose thread. James stood up, his jaw tight. Then what do we do? I stood too, facing him. We make him show his hand. We force him to come to us, instead of letting him hunt me on his timeline. We prove it. How? I have to talk to him, face to face. I have to make him believe that I'm just another person in the background, not a threat. Then you ask the questions that matter, and we record every lie he tells you. That's dangerous, James said. I know. You could get hurt. I'm already hurt, I said quietly. I've been hurt for 8 years. At least this way the pain might be for something. James moved closer, and I didn't step back. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and brushed a tear from my cheek that I hadn't realized was there. I know we've only known each other for 3 days. I know this is crazy, but I've spent my entire life surrounded by people who want something from me. And 3 days ago, I met someone who just wanted to be kind to my mother. No agenda, no calculation, just basic human decency. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm about to risk everything on a stranger, and I need to know if I'm crazy or if you feel what I feel. I looked at his hand on my face, at the expensive watch and the manicured nails that belonged to a man who'd never worked a day in the physical sense. Then I looked at his eyes, and I saw something that Samuel had never shown me. Vulnerability. Real vulnerability, not the calculated kind. I feel something, I said. I don't know if it's trust yet, but I feel something. He smiled, and it transformed his entire face. Then let's prove it to each other. Let's prove it by taking down the man who destroyed you. We spent the next hours on that campus, sitting on those steps, planning something that was either brilliant or completely insane. James explained his company, his legal team, his resources. I explained Samuel, his patterns, his manipulations, his arrogance that always made him believe he was 10 steps ahead of everyone else. By the time the sun started setting, turning the campus gold, I had made a decision. I was going to trust James Mitchell, not because I was sure he deserved it, not because he'd proved himself completely, but because I was tired of being afraid, and sometimes the only way forward is to walk straight into the thing that terrifies you, and see if it's actually as dangerous as you've imagined. As we walked across campus together, I caught glimpses of our reflection in building windows. The waitress and the billionaire, their lives intersecting in ways that should have been impossible. But for the first time in 8 years, I felt like I might be more than just a victim of Samuel's ambition. I felt like I might be someone worth fighting for. James's office occupied the entire 42nd floor of a tower in Midtown that probably had more square footage than some small towns. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of Manhattan that made most people gasp. I didn't gasp. I'd seen views like this before, back when I thought views mattered more than stability. Back when I thought ambition was the same as love. His assistant, a woman named Margaret, who looked like she could negotiate peace treaties in her sleep, glanced up when we entered. Her professional smile wavered slightly at the sight of me in my simple black dress, still wearing the uniform of my invisibility. "Mr. Mitchell, you're not scheduled to be in," she said. "Change of plans. Hold my calls for the next hour. And Margaret, complete confidentiality on this meeting." I felt her curious gaze following us as we passed into his private office. The space was exactly what I would have expected. Masculine, expensive, designed to communicate power without announcing it. Dark wood, leather chairs, the kind of subtle wealth that whispered instead of shouted. "Sit," Jane said, not as a command but as an invitation. He moved toward a bar that contained bottles worth more than my annual salary. Drink? No. I need to be clear-headed for this. He poured himself 2 fingers of something amber and sat across from me. Tell me about Samuel. Everything. Start at the beginning. So I did. I told him about meeting Samuel at Northwestern, about the electricity of building something together, about the moment I realized I was in love. I told him about Nexus Financial, about the 3 years we spent developing trading algorithms that beat every competitor in the market. I told him about the day Samuel decided he wanted it all, and executed a plan that was so thorough, so systematic, that it took me months to realize I'd been completely erased. He filed fraud charges, I said, but not because he believed them. He filed them because he needed people to believe I was guilty of something. And when the case was falling apart, when my lawyer proved that I couldn't have stolen from the company I was a partner in, he dropped the charges and played the role of the magnanimous one, made it look like he was being merciful when he was actually just protecting himself. And no one questioned it? People don't question rich men when they're being generous. They just assume the poor person was guilty and got lucky. James set down his drink. I need to call him. I need to see if he mentions you, if he shows any sign of knowing we're connected. Do it. He pulled out his phone and dialed. I watched his face as he waited for Samuel to pick up, watched the moment the connection was made. Samuel, perfect timing. I was just reviewing the merger documents. No, everything's fine. I had a few questions, actually. Some of my technical team flagged a few inconsistencies in the filing dates. Yes, I know it's Friday. This is important. I could hear Samuel's voice through the phone, smooth and confident, charming. It was the voice that had once made me believe in forever. So these algorithms you mentioned, the ones that are the foundation of Nexus, how long did development actually take? 3 years, you said? And your team developed these entirely in-house? Tell me about your lead researcher. I'd like to meet them before we close. Pause. I watched James's jaw tighten. Singapore, you said? And they're scheduled to return when? That's convenient. I'd really like to accelerate this timeline. Can you bring them back earlier? I understand it's complicated, but it's essential to our due diligence. Samuel's response came quicker this time. His voice had changed, become slightly defensive. No, I just want to verify the development chain. Standard stuff. The researcher is unavailable, you said? Male? PhD from MIT? Right. Well, I'll need documentation on the development process. Original notes, testing protocols, everything. You can have it to me by Monday? Perfect. James ended the call and set the phone down. His hands were shaking slightly. He lied about everything, he said quietly. The timeline, the development team, all of it. Of course he did. And he's going to fabricate documentation now. He's going to create fake notes, falsified records, anything to make himself look legitimate. Yes, that's what he does. He rewrites history until people stop looking for the truth. James stood up and started pacing. How long have you known him? 5 years, total. 3 building the company, 2 engaged. And you're sure about this? You're sure the work was yours? I'm certain, I said. I have the original files, cloud backups from my personal devices, dated and time-stamped. Metadata that shows what device they were created on, when they were modified, everything. I kept copies because I couldn't believe what was happening, so I documented it obsessively. James stopped pacing and looked at me. We need a lawyer, someone who specializes in intellectual property theft and corporate fraud. I know a woman named Patricia Chen. She's expensive but thorough. She defended me when the charges were filed, before Samuel dropped them. Call her. So I did. And Patricia, who'd been charging me in installments for 2 years, and who I owed more money to than I could currently repay, answered on the first ring, like she'd been waiting for this call. Sophia, it's 3 o'clock on a Friday. This better be good. I found him, I said. I found a way to prove it. There was a silence on the line that felt like a held breath. Then, tell me everything. By the time we hung up, Patricia had agreed to meet us on Monday morning. She'd also agreed to reach out to a forensic accountant and a technical expert who could analyze the metadata on my files and testify to their authenticity in court. This is going to be expensive, Patricia had warned. I know, James had said, taking the phone from me. Send me the bills, all of them. After James hung up, he sat back down across from me. I'm going to need you to trust me. Completely. No more testing. No more protecting yourself. We need to work together like partners. Partners? I repeated. The word felt dangerous. Yes, in this, in proving the truth, in making sure Samuel pays for what he did. Can you do that? I thought about Samuel. about the 8 years I'd spent invisible, about the woman I'd become because I couldn't afford to become anyone else. Yes, I said. I can do that. I could hear Samuel's voice through the phone, smooth and confident, charming. It was the voice that had once made me believe in forever. So these algorithms you mentioned, the ones that are the foundation of Nexus, how long did development actually take? 3 years, you said? And your team developed these entirely in-house? Tell me about your lead researcher. I'd like to meet them before we close. Pause. I watched James's jaw tighten. Singapore, you said? And they're scheduled to return when? That's convenient. I'd really like to accelerate this timeline. Can you bring them back earlier? I understand it's complicated, but it's essential to our due diligence. Samuel's response came quicker this time. His voice had changed. Become slightly defensive. No, I just want to verify the development chain. Standard stuff. The researcher is unavailable, you said? Male? PhD from MIT? Right. Well, I'll need documentation on the development process. Original notes, testing protocols, everything. You can have it to me by Monday? Perfect. James ended the call and set the phone down. His hands were shaking slightly. He lied about everything, he said quietly. The timeline, the development team, all of it. Of course he did. And he's going to fabricate documentation now. He's going to create fake notes, falsified records, anything to make himself look legitimate. Yes, that's what he does. He rewrites history until people stop looking for the truth. James stood up and started pacing. How long have you known him? 5 years, total. 3 building the company, 2 engaged. And you're sure about this? You're sure the work was yours? I'm certain, I said. I have the original files, cloud backups from my personal devices, dated and timestamped. Metadata that shows what device they were created on, when they were modified, everything. I kept copies because I couldn't believe what was happening, so I documented it obsessively. James stopped pacing and looked at me. We need a lawyer, someone who specializes in intellectual property theft and corporate fraud. I know a woman named Patricia Chen. She's expensive but thorough. She defended me when the charges were filed, before Samuel dropped them. Call her. So I did. And Patricia, who'd been charging me in installments for 2 years, and who I owed more money to than I could currently repay, answered on the first ring, like she'd been waiting for this call. Sophia, it's 3 o'clock on a Friday. This better be good. I found him, I said. I found a way to prove it. There was a silence on the line that felt like a held breath. Then, tell me everything. By the time we hung up, Patricia had agreed to meet us on Monday morning. She'd also agreed to reach out to a forensic accountant and a technical expert who could analyze the metadata on my files and testify to their authenticity in court. This is going to be expensive, Patricia had warned. I know, James had said, taking the phone from me. Send me the bills, all of them. After James hung up, he sat back down across from me. I'm going to need you to trust me. Completely. No more testing. No more protecting yourself. We need to work together like partners. Partners? I repeated. The word felt dangerous. Yes, in this, in proving the truth, in making sure Samuel pays for what he did. Can you do that? I thought about Samuel, about the 8 years I'd spent invisible, about the woman I'd become because I couldn't afford to become anyone else. Yes, I said. I can do that. The Nexus financial offices occupied 3 floors of a glass tower in the financial district. I'd walked through these doors every day for 3 years. My badge opening the security gates, my name on the directory next to Samuel's. Now, walking in with James Mitchell and Patricia Chen, I was a stranger in a place that I'd built. The receptionist's face when she saw me was priceless. Recognition flickered, then confusion. I'd aged, changed, become someone she couldn't quite place. We have a meeting with Samuel Torres, James said smoothly. Tell him James Mitchell is here. 10 minutes later, we were in the same conference room where Samuel and I had planned Nexus's expansion. The same table where he'd kissed me after closing our first major deal. The same space where I'd felt like I was building something that mattered. Samuel entered with his standard confidence. Perfectly styled black hair, expensive suit, the smile that had once melted me and now just made my skin crawl. James, good to see you. And you've brought... He stopped. His face went completely blank for 3 seconds, which was 2 seconds more than he should have allowed. I'm sorry, have we met? We have, I said quietly, though I'm not surprised you don't remember. Samuel's mask slid back into place. I'm afraid. You're afraid, I interrupted, standing up. That's accurate. You should be afraid, Samuel. I walked around the table until I was close enough to see the fear flicker in his eyes. Then I showed him my phone. The photos, Samuel and me at Nexus's launch party, arms around each other. Samuel and me working late in the office. Samuel kissing my cheek at an intimate dinner, my engagement ring visible on my left hand. Hundreds of people, you said, I told him quietly. Is that what I was to you? Just another face in the crowd? What is this? Samuel demanded, directing the question at James, completely ignoring me. What game are you playing? No game, James said calmly. Sofia Rivera designed 17 of the algorithms your company claims to have developed. My legal team has been reviewing Nexus's intellectual property documentation, and we've found some interesting inconsistencies. Samuel's face went pale. That's impossible. All of Nexus's intellectual property was developed internally. Your team? I asked. You mean the MIT PhD who's conveniently in Singapore and unavailable for meetings? This is ridiculous, Samuel said, but his voice lacked conviction. This woman is clearly unstable. She's making accusations based on what? I pulled out the hard drive Patricia had given me. Based on the original development notes written in my handwriting. Based on emails where you asked me to explain the technical specifications because you couldn't understand the code. Based on metadata that shows these files were created on my personal laptop 6 months before you filed the patents. Samuel stood up so fast his chair fell backward. You need to leave, both of you, and if you continue with these accusations, I'll have you both sued for defamation. Defamation requires a false statement, Patricia said, speaking for the first time. She'd been sitting quietly in the corner, taking notes, and now she leaned forward with the expression of someone who'd found the kill switch. Everything we've stated is documented and verifiable. We have the original files, the metadata, the emails, the patent applications with Sofia's name on them. We have 3 independent experts prepared to testify that these algorithms couldn't have been developed without access to external systems that were, in fact, in Sofia's possession. This is insane, Samuel said. You're talking about destroying a billion-dollar company based on what you stole from her, James said quietly. Samuel, you were going to merge with my company and sell me technology that you don't have legitimate rights to. That's fraud, theft of intellectual property, corporate malfeasance. I have documentation. You have fabricated documentation, I said. I have the real thing. And Samuel, this time I'm not going to disappear. This time I'm not going to let you rewrite the story. I looked at this man who had once promised me forever, who had looked me in the eye and called me his partner, his fiancé, his future, and then systematically erased me from all of it. And I felt something shift inside my chest. Not love, not hate, but something cleaner. Resolution. The merger with Mitchell Industries is cancelled, James said, effective immediately, and my legal team will be filing a complaint with the SEC, along with copies of all evidence of fraudulent intellectual property claims. We'll be recommending criminal charges as well. Samuel looked between us, his face cycling through panic, calculation, and something that might have been defeat. This isn't over, he said finally. I'll fight this. Of course you will, I said. This time I'm not fighting someone with my face. This time I'm fighting someone with my face. As we walked out of the conference room, I didn't look back. The Nexus offices receded behind us, and with them, the last piece of my old life. I wasn't the same woman who'd worked in that space. I wasn't the same woman who'd trusted Samuel completely. I was someone new, someone stronger, someone who'd learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't anger or vindication. 3 months later, sitting in James's Tribeca penthouse with my name all over the legal proceedings against Samuel, I got a phone call that I hadn't been expecting. My mother. Not on Christmas, not on my birthday, but on a regular Wednesday in February, when nothing was remarkable, except that Samuel Torres was about to be indicted on charges of fraud, theft, and corporate malfeasance. When his company was imploding, when the story of how he'd stolen from his partner was being covered in every major financial publication, when my name was finally being restored to the work I'd actually done. Sofia? Her voice was different, warmer, rounded at the edges in a way I hadn't heard since I was young enough to believe she loved me without conditions. How are you, sweetheart? Sweetheart. The word felt like a weapon wrapped in silk. I'm fine, Mom, I said carefully. How are you? Oh, you know, same old. I was just thinking about you. I saw something online about that company you used to work for, and it made me think of you. Are you doing well? I stood at the window of James's apartment, looking out at Manhattan, at the city that had nearly destroyed me, and then given me the tools to rebuild myself. Yes, I said. I'm doing very well, actually. That's wonderful. Your father and I have been so proud. We saw the article in the Times about what happened, and we just thought, that's our Sophia. Our Sophia. As if I belonged to them. As if they'd earned the right to claim me. Did you? I asked quietly. Of course. You always were so smart, so capable. We knew you'd land on your feet. I remembered standing on their porch 8 years ago with everything I owned in a car and 2 babies who didn't have a single family member willing to help. I remembered my mother's face when I asked for 3 weeks on a couch. I remembered the porch light clicking off as I walked away. Mom, do you remember when I came to you after Daniel died? Silence. Not the good kind. That was a long time ago, sweetie. We were all going through so much. You told me you couldn't be my safety net, I said. You told me that 2 babies was a lot to take on, and I was an adult who needed to handle my own mess. Sophia, we've been through this. We were dealing with our own difficulties. You had a nice house. You had money. You had a family. What I had was a checking account with $400 and 2 infants who couldn't understand why their grandfather wouldn't help them. My mother's voice got smaller. We didn't know you were in such dire straits. You didn't ask, I said. That's the thing, Mom. You never asked. When I told you about the company I'd built with Samuel, when I told you about the merger, when I told you about anything that mattered to me, you forgot my children's names, Caleb and Hannah. Those were their names, and you called them the babies, like they were abstract concepts instead of your grandchildren. Sophia, that's not fair. You're calling me now because you read about my name in the Times, because the Riverside Gazette covered the story of the woman whose ex-fiancé stole from her, because I'm suddenly the kind of interesting that's worth your attention. That's not true, my mother said, but her voice cracked slightly, which meant it was completely true. When was the last time you called me before this? Not on Christmas or my birthday, but just to see how I was. She didn't answer, because she couldn't, because the answer was never. I spent 8 years invisible to the people who were supposed to love me, I said. Samuel made me invisible at work, and you made me invisible at home. And I let both of them do it, because I didn't understand that I was worth more than that. I didn't understand that I deserved people who showed up for me when I wasn't profitable or publicly successful. Sophia, please. I'm not angry anymore, I said, and I meant it. I'm grateful, actually, because you taught me exactly what kind of love I don't want, and that made it possible for me to recognize the kind I do. What do you mean? I looked behind me at James, who was pretending not to listen while absolutely listening, who'd been listening to everything I needed to say for months. I mean, I've found people who love me for who I am, not what I can give them. People who show up when it's hard. People who believe in me, even when I don't believe in myself. That's wonderful, honey. We're happy for you. Maybe we could all get together sometime. I don't think so, I said gently. I think we need to stay in our separate lives. I'm not angry, Mom. I'm done trying to make you love me the way I needed to be loved. That's not your fault. It's just a fact. And I've made peace with it. There was a long silence. Then my mother said, I understand, in a voice that sounded very small. Good, I said. I hope you're well. Take care of yourself. And I hung up. James wrapped his arms around me from behind. You okay? More than okay, I said, and realized I meant it completely. The email arrived on a Tuesday, sent to me by accident by a man named Robert Harrison, who worked in the accounting department at Nexus Financial, and had apparently meant to send it to Samuel instead. I almost deleted it. Then I saw my name in the subject line. I opened it, and found 8 years of emails scrolled backward, the way email does when nobody bothers to trim the thread. 8 years of conversation between my mother, my father, and my brother. 8 years of discussion about me, about Samuel, about the company we'd built. The most recent email, sent just 3 days ago, was from my mother to Robert Harrison at Nexus. She was asking him to contact her with an update on Samuel's situation. To find out if there was any way to help him survive the legal proceedings. She was trying to protect Samuel Torres. I scrolled further back and found the emails that really mattered. Dated to just months after Daniel died. Dated to the year after I'd taken refuge with the Sinclairs, when I was supposed to be falling apart, but was actually rebuilding. My mother, I'm concerned that Sophia isn't appreciating what a favorable position she's in with that family. She needs to understand that she has certain expectations to manage. My father, the Sinclair property is valuable. If we could establish a partnership. My brother, I'm thinking about asking her for a loan. The fitness business is taking off, but we need capital. Family should help family. But the worst email, the one that made my hands shake, was dated 6 months before Samuel decided to destroy my reputation. My mother had emailed him. My mother had written to my fiancé and told him that I was becoming difficult to manage, that I had ambitions beyond what was appropriate for a woman in my position, that she was concerned about my influence on the company's decisions. My mother had given Samuel permission to take everything from me. I sat at James's desk and read the email 3 times. Then I called Patricia Chen. "Tell me this is enough," I said. "Enough for what?" "For more charges against Samuel, for proving that this wasn't just about greed. He wasn't just stealing from me, he was being encouraged to do it by my family." There was a pause. "Sophia, your family's words are unpleasant, but they're not illegal. They didn't force Samuel to commit fraud." "No," I said quietly, "but they gave him permission." I hung up and sat in James's office, reading my mother's words over and over, and I understood something with a clarity that felt like breaking glass. Some people will always see you as a problem to be solved, even the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally, even the people who gave you life. The question is whether you let them define you. James found me 3 hours later, still staring at the emails. "What happened?" he asked. So I told him about the emails, about my mother's contact with Samuel, about the systematic way my own family had viewed me as a liability instead of a person worth protecting. "That's," James started, then stopped. "I don't have words." "I do," I said. "They're complicated words, angry words, disappointed words, but also free words." "Free?" "Because now I know it wasn't about me. It was never about me. I wasn't broken or difficult or too ambitious. I was just inconvenient. And I spent 8 years thinking there was something wrong with me because I couldn't make people who saw me as inconvenient suddenly start loving me properly." James sat across from me. "What do you want to do?" "I want to see them," I said. "My family. I want to see their faces when they understand that I know what they did." "That's risky," James said carefully. "Emotionally, I mean." "I know, but I need to do it. I need to stand in front of them as the woman I became despite them, not because of them. I need them to understand that they couldn't break me, that Samuel couldn't erase me, that the whole world tried to make me invisible, and I learned how to shine instead." James reached across the desk and took my hand. "When do you want to do this?" "When the trial is over," I said. "When Samuel's conviction is final. When my name has been completely restored. When I'm no longer fighting for justice, and I'm just standing in the truth of who I am." He squeezed my hand. "Then let's make sure he's convicted." Samuel Torres's trial lasted 6 weeks. 6 weeks of my testimony, of experts explaining metadata, of lawyers presenting evidence that I'd carefully preserved for 8 years. 6 weeks of watching my ex-fiancé's face as he realized that he couldn't charm his way out of this, that money and lawyers had their limits. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all charges: fraud, theft of intellectual property, corporate malfeasance, filing false documents with the SEC. Samuel Torres was looking at 5 to 7 years in federal prison, substantial fines, and the complete dissolution of Nexus Financial. The judge gave him 5 years. Standing outside the courthouse with Patricia and James, with camera flashes and reporters asking questions I didn't answer, I felt the weight lift. Not completely. Grief and betrayal don't disappear, but enough that I could breathe again. "What's next?" the reporters asked. "What's next is I build something new," I said, "something that's entirely mine." 3 months later, I founded Rivera Computational Finance. James provided the initial capital, but the company structure was entirely mine. I owned the algorithms, I owned the client relationships, I owned the future. Within a year, Rivera had 17 major clients and revenue that made my old life look like a child's allowance. Within 2 years, I'd been profiled in Forbes, Fast Company, and Bloomberg as one of the most innovative financial technologists under 40. My mother saw the Bloomberg article. She called me. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. "Sophia, it's Mom. I just wanted to say how proud we are. I know we had our difficulties, but family is family, and we'd love to reconnect. Your father and I were wondering if we could come visit the offices sometime. Maybe get involved in." I deleted it. My brother called twice. The first time he wanted to borrow money. The second time he wanted to discuss a business opportunity with my company. I let both calls go to voicemail. My father sent a letter. It was handwritten, which was probably supposed to make it meaningful. I read the first sentence. Dear Sophia, I've been thinking about the past and realize I wasn't the father I should have been. I set the letter down and walked away. I didn't need their apologies. I didn't need their regret. I needed them to understand that they'd lost me, and no amount of late arriving remorse was going to change that. What I did need was standing in James's apartment, watching me work on a presentation for a new client, bringing me coffee at 3 a.m. because I'd forgotten to eat. What I did need was a partner who'd believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, who'd walked away from a billion-dollar deal because his integrity mattered more than his profit margin. What I needed, I was realizing, was him. 6 months after Samuel's conviction, I was standing in James's kitchen at dawn, watching the sun turn Manhattan gold, when he walked up behind me and asked me to turn around. I did. He was on one knee, and he was holding out a ring that was so perfectly me, elegant without being ostentatious, beautiful without being showy, that I started crying before he even asked the question. Sophia Rivera, he said, and his voice was steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. You walked into my life 8 years into the nightmare that Samuel Torres created. You showed my mother kindness when you had no reason to trust anyone. You taught me that integrity matters more than profit. You made me believe that justice is possible if you're brave enough to fight for it. James, I started, but he held up his hand. Let me finish. I've spent my entire life surrounded by people who want something from me. My time, my money, my connections, my name. And then I met you, and you didn't want any of that. You just wanted to be treated like a person instead of a problem. You wanted someone to believe you. You wanted someone to show up. He paused, his gray eyes shining with emotion. I love you, Sophia. I love your brilliant mind and your generous heart. I love the way you sign to my mother, and the way you make terrible coffee, and the way you get this little crinkle between your eyebrows when you're concentrating on code. I love the woman you had to become because the people who were supposed to protect you failed you. I love the strength that came from that failure. This is insane, I whispered. We've only known each other for 6 months. I know, and I don't care. Will you marry me? I looked down at this man who'd risked everything to fight for someone he barely knew, who'd seen my value when I'd forgotten how to see it myself, and I said yes. The wedding happened 6 months later, small, intimate, just family, and by family, I mean James's mother, Patricia Chen, and the forensic accountant who'd spent weeks proving that Samuel was a liar. My biological family wasn't invited. I didn't send them announcements or photos. I'd mourned them and moved on, and that was the best gift I could give us both. Standing in a white dress that I'd designed myself, speaking vows I'd written myself, I realized that this wasn't a fairy tale ending. This was a woman who'd been broken by people she trusted, learning how to rebuild herself into someone stronger. It was about choosing a partner who understood that love wasn't about diminishing yourself to fit into someone else's ambitions. It was about finding someone who loved you for your ambitions, not despite them. During the reception, James pulled me aside. I have something for you. He handed me a folder. Inside was paperwork for something called the Rivera Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to helping women who'd been victims of financial fraud regain legal control of their intellectual property. This is your foundation, he said. Completely funded by me, completely run by you. No questions, no conditions. Just something you can use to help the women that Samuel didn't destroy, but who might have been destroyed by someone else. I looked at this man and understood why I'd said yes so quickly. Not because he was rich or powerful or could give me things, but because he understood that real love means helping someone become the best version of themselves, not the version that best serves you. 9 months after my wedding to James Mitchell, I returned to the restaurant where everything had started. Bellini's looked exactly the same. Same crystal chandeliers, same marble floors, same wealthy diners pretending not to notice the service staff who made their experience possible. I walked through the door in a suit that had cost more than my monthly rent back when I was invisible, and the host barely recognized me. Dr. Rivera, welcome. Do you have a reservation? Dr. Rivera. The title and the name felt like armor and also like freedom. I was Dr. Sophia Rivera now. Dr. Rivera who'd built her own company. Dr. Rivera who'd testified against the man who'd stolen from her. Dr. Rivera who'd learned that the quietest revenge is simply becoming exactly what people said you couldn't be. I requested a table in the main dining room, the same one where James had first noticed me 8 years ago. The old manager, Margaret, came out to greet me. Recognition flickered across her face, then something like shame. "Dr. Rivera," she said carefully, "it's been a long time." "It has," I agreed. "I have something I wanted to tell you actually. Something important." Margaret's face went pale. She thought I was going to complain, to sue, to make some grand gesture of vindication. I did none of those things. "I want you to know that you work with women who are invisible," I said. "Not because invisibility is their natural state, but because you've trained them to make themselves small. Because the restaurant industry, because all of society really, is built on the idea that people who serve are somehow less than the people being served. And I want you to understand that some of those invisible women are brilliant. Some of them have degrees you've never heard of. Some of them are rebuilding lives after catastrophic betrayals. Some of them are just doing their best to survive." Margaret started to speak, but I held up my hand. "The women working here right now, do you know their names? Do you know their stories? Do you know what they're capable of?" We have a policy about fraternizing with staff." "Of course you do. That's how you keep them invisible. That's how you ensure they stay in their place." I stood up and looked around the dining room. Every server, every busser, every person working to facilitate the luxury of people who barely acknowledge their existence. "Here's what I learned," I said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "I learned that being invisible is a choice that gets made for you, but staying invisible is a choice that you have to make yourself. I learned that the people who love you will be the ones who see you when you're trying to disappear. And I'll learn that revenge isn't about making other people understand what they did to you. It's about becoming so undeniably brilliant that they have no choice but to recognize the gift they threw away." "Dr. Rivera, perhaps we should discuss this privately," Margaret started. "No," I said. "I'm done being private about my story. I'm done pretending that what happened to me was shameful. Samuel Torres stole from me. My family abandoned me. And I rebuilt myself anyway. I built a company. I built a foundation. I married someone who actually believes in me. And I did all of it in full view of everyone who said it was impossible." I pulled out an envelope and set it on the table. "This is a donation to the Bellini's Employee Education Fund. It's $200,000. I'm setting up a scholarship program for restaurant workers who want to go to college. If you're interested in actually seeing your staff members as people with potential instead of problems, there are resources. I'll send you One person believed me when I was telling the truth. One person was willing to risk something substantial to fight for justice. If you want your staff to thrive, maybe start by being that person for them. Maybe start by actually seeing them." I walked out of Bellini's and didn't look back. Let me tell you what I've learned in the 8 years since Samuel Torres destroyed my life, and the 2 years since James Mitchell helped me rebuild it. The loudest revenge isn't screaming about what was taken from you. It's building something so beautiful that people can't help but recognize the gift they tried to destroy. It's becoming so undeniably brilliant that the people who said you couldn't do it are forced to acknowledge that they were wrong. But more importantly, I've learned this. The people who love you will be the ones who see you when you're trying to disappear. And they will choose to see you, not because you've become successful or wealthy or powerful, but because they recognized your value before any of those things happened. Samuel Torres saw me as a problem to solve. My family saw me as an inconvenience to manage. But James Mitchell saw me as a woman worth fighting for. And that's the difference between love and transaction. That's the difference between real partnership and manipulation. I spent 8 years invisible to people who were supposed to love me. And in that invisibility, I learned who I really was. Not the diminished version that Samuel and my family had created, but the actual version underneath. The version that could rebuild, that could fight, that could become exactly what she was always meant to be. The moral isn't that I won. The moral is that winning and becoming yourself are sometimes the same thing. The moral is that the people who love you right don't need you to earn it. They just need you to be willing to stop disappearing. And sometimes, the greatest gift another person can give you is the simple act of seeing you completely and deciding you're worth the fight. That's dramatic revenge. Not the kind where you destroy someone the way they destroyed you, but the kind where you build something so remarkable that their attempts to erase you become proof of your importance. Where you become so undeniably yourself that staying small is no longer possible,